Daily Telegraph, a picture there of Prince Charles looking very much like a king, I have to say. What sort of king shall I be? Above the picture. But their lead story is thousands needlessly filling in tax forms. These are the self-assessment tax forms that we all dread.
Yeah, and you know, this is obviously, it's the last day tomorrow, so this makes sense as being a splash because everybody's got it on their mind. Presumably, if you can still do it tomorrow, everybody will be rushing to their computer to do it because they will have left it to the absolute last minute.
You get a fine, don't you? If it's
yeah, I think so.
£100 fine.
But it's saying that those who owe less than £3,000 in tax, they might be just needlessly filling out these forms because actually HMRC have the power to just claw it back from your income in the spring. But they're not telling people that. They're not making it clear enough. So people are going through all these tax forms for nothing.
And it is stressful. I'm speaking as a rubbish person who only just before I came here tonight finally got rid of my tax thing for, you know, less than the stated amount there. And I would love somebody to have told me that maybe I didn't really need to fill it in. There's a statistic here that the figures implied that a saver could hold as much as £1.5 million in a bank account, paying 1% interest without the need to file any kind of return. And I think this must, I'm sure, be the majority of people. Even if it's just to do with doing a little bit of freelance work and to do with savings revenue, it just seems, and also it must bureaucracy, and when there's lots of cutbacks, I don't understand why they're not making it more public.
Yeah, well, I mean, the Inland Revenue is quoted in the paper saying they do write to 400,000 people a year saying they don't need to do self-assessment forms. So that is their defence. They are contacting people. And of course there will be some people who are terrified of doing it themselves, and perhaps rightly so, and pay an accountant to do it.
So there might
all
that money.
Oh, no, I mean £300, £400, £500 for an accountant to fill in an online form that they don't need to fill in.
But I must say BuzzFeed did a good article on this, just for a little plug, because they did the 22 hideous stages of filling out your self-assessment. And the first one is, you know, you get the reminder in April, so you've got till next January, and obviously you leave it till January to do it. Yeah. Everybody leaves it last minute.
You put all those bits of paper in a safe place, and then when it comes to you go, you can't find it.
I know a lot of people have some kind of feeling of self-satisfaction once they've done their tax return, even though it's cost them an awful lot of money. Yeah. They've paid their tax, they've done it, they've got it out of the way, that's it for another year. It's a bit weird, isn't it? Let's move on to the Guardian now. There's a couple of stories on the Guardian that we want to look at. Boris Johnson obviously hitting the Sun newspaper today because of his comments about jihadis and those young people that are radicalised in Britain, and his thinking behind it, and MI5 thinking behind it. It continues today on the front page of The Guardian. Johnson condemned for calling jihadis the W word and lacking in self-esteem. So the criticism continues.
I was wondering how you were going to approach that. But the W word is how we will approach it.
Well, I could have said bleep.
Yeah, true. Yeah, so, you know, saying that they watch porn, they can't meet women, about jihadists, and it was a good Sun interview that's been followed, but it followed up a lot today. But obviously, Boris Johnson is one of those politicians that can say these things. You couldn't imagine another politician being able to be that open and just say exactly what he really thinks. But he has actually been condemned in this article by the Quilliam Foundation, set up by ex-Islamists to challenge extremism, just saying, you know, it's completely unquantifiable to try to second-guess whether a jihadi is suffering from isolation. But certainly his comments are pretty lurid and have captured a lot of attention today.
I mean, he did speak to the BBC about it today, standing by what he said, saying that he was referring to a report by MI5 that is trying to demystify radicalisation and extremism, that what he's trying to say is that these are young people who feel a bit lost in the world, lack self-esteem and want a purpose.
I mean,
that kind of makes sense.
You know, he does say, you know, this is the thing that makes them feel strong and they're like winners. But I think sort of turning it into like a common room joke it's not a funny issue, and it's just a ridiculous statement. I mean, sex actually is the most searched for term on the internet. You know, it is. So it's just ridiculous to put it into that context when it's, you know, I'm not casting any aspersions here, but there's statistics online that 70% of men spend their time looking at porn on the internet.
There is probably a wider issue about a general purpose for young men who feel that there is nothing else for them in life but to join.
Yeah, but what Louise is saying is
absolutely.
that you know, that's not just men looking for sex on the internet.
No, and this is just a wider...
There are some very successful men that probably look for sex on the internet.
I'm sure there are.
I'm sure there are. Now, also another story on The Guardian is the comments of Steve White. And this kind of linked to what Boris Johnson's been talking about in some ways, in the sense that more protection against terrorism, particularly terrorism at home. Steve White, who chairs the Police Federation, says that he would like every officer to have a taser gun. And he feels that could protect us from terrorism. But of course tasers are really controversial, aren't they?
Yes, it's quite a bold statement to make. I mean, this comes after the terrorist threat level has been raised to severe. Now police are trying to find the best ways of protecting the public from the real fear is this lone wolf terrorist attack, like Charlie Hebdo, you know, came out of nowhere in Paris. And you know, this suggestion every frontline uniformed police officer should be offered a taser stun gun. But lots of people out there will be pretty worried about just local policemen just casually walking down the streets with taser guns, stun guns. And is there any evidence that will actually stop a terrorist unleashing an attack? It's a very big step to take.
I mean, I agree with you. I think it's, on one hand, I think they're concerned because you're upping the ante, because police, you know, they may not have guns, but they've got tasers, and so is that actually likely to cause more violence out there? But as you say, if you've got people who are walking around with machine guns and things, surely the cost of having every policeman or policewoman armed with a taser, are we not better off having actually more police men and women actually out on the streets or working at computers or whatever, trying to find terrorists? Because I'm not sure really what a taser can do. Yeah.
Well, I mean, and also it would be interesting to see if, for example, you know, let's imagine that every officer is armed with a taser, how often it would be used on a terrorist. That would be the worry of many organisations, wouldn't it? That it ends up being used on shoplifters and burglars or people under suspicion.
And 10 people have died as a result of being tasered over recent years, so...
It's difficult to find a balance of protecting society and endangering society at the same time. Louise Emery, many thanks for taking us through the papers.
Thank you.
Thank you very much to you for watching as well. Do stay with us here on BBC News. At midnight, we'll have the latest in our top story: 4 burglars jailed for attacking a law professor in his own home.